I'm glad you asked that question because it gives me time to expound upon it. This is not the only time this has happened. It happened I think what this marks to me is the end of the American Empire. And because that's what happened with the end of the Roman Empire. And what happened at the end of the Roman Empire, the leaders of Rome debased the currency. They were taking silver coins and gold coins, they were filing them and melting them and doing all these goofy things. They were fighting wars, we're still fighting wars that we couldn't afford, they couldn't afford. And they started taxing the worker. And back in Roman times, the worker was the farmer or the yeoman. And so the government, those fat asses up there, were just taxing the crap out of the worker. And pretty soon the worker says, why should I work? Because, I've got to just keep giving my money to the government. And pretty soon they call them Roman circuses, so they're the big coliseums, and they were feeding lions, people to lions and all that other stuff. Today we have the Super Bowl and the March Madness, and everything's the same, it's the same. So your question is a very important question because it's not a simple answer, but my concern is it is the end of the American Empire. And very simply is because our Federal Reserve Bank, our Treasury, and our government has messed up the US dollar so much that they have to find a way to keep people happy. And so they want to just, quote unquote, print money, which they are doing. So the stimulus money they print, everybody says, oh God, it's because they shut the economy down and this and that. And everybody says, yeah, so they're going to give me PPP and all of this stuff. So just remember this, that money comes from production. And when we pay people not to produce, which is PPP and all that, we're just paying them not to revolt. And that's what happened during the Roman times. And so that's why I say it's the end of the American Empire, because our money is corrupt. So that's basically it. Now, would I take the money? Absolutely. We're talking about it. Don't fight the government. Don't fight the Fed. Don't fight politics. If they're going to give me $1,000, I'll take it. But I would convert it into either gold, silver, or Bitcoin. Right, and the more the government pay, and this is globally, it's not just the US, or it's not a racial thing. They're just paying everybody not to work today. Because the monetary system is coming apart. But you've got to be smarter than the government, which is not that hard to do. And it's just coming apart right now. And, like when the Fed talks about stimulus checks, well, the only people that get rich are Bezos and Zuckerberg. They get all that money for free. It goes into them via BlackRock, a hedge fund, and it goes straight into Wall Street. And then the guys who own Facebook and Amazon get richer. Every time you get a hot little dollar or a peso or a yen or a yuan in your hand, you have the power to determine what you do with it. And so, when I was in my 20s, that's when I started buying gold and silver. And today, I'm still buying gold and silver. And nothing's changed. I just don't trust my government. If you trust your government, have a good time. What they're doing is they're propping up zombies. And zombies are companies that are mismanaged. Like Hertz right now is completely bankrupt. Boeing is bankrupt. Cruise ships are bankrupt, Ford's bankrupt, and the Fed, the Treasury, and Wall Street keep propping them up. Well, it makes it harder for your generation. Like I always said to you, the millennials, man, you guys have been screwed. And there's a war on in politics, war in China. Chinese government's going to shut down Hong Kong. And, it's a monetary war, which is why I always ask the question, why doesn't school teach us about money? It's not an accident, but for some reason I was one of those geeky kids that's what I studied. I kept asking, what am I going to learn about money? And my teacher gave me some religious answer about the love of money being the root of all evil. And I said, it may be evil to you, but I like to have some. So now it's all coming apart at the seams. So gold, silver, Bitcoin, they're not the answer, but they're kind of an insurance policy against the incompetence of our leaders. Well, that's why there's no financial education in our schools. I mean, most school teachers, they're like my parents, they're good people, but they're functionally poor people. They have not a clue. They're clueless in Ohio, and they've got no money, and they want a pension, and they want tenure, and they want job security. And so they'll do whatever you tell them to do. So that was my family, and it's pretty tragic. But anyway, that's life. On the other side of it, like I've said to your generation, you have more power today with that iPhone than any other generation in history. Yeah. You know what I mean? That iPhone, is that 2007 or 2009 it came out? Man, you guys have so much power to be the best entrepreneurs in the world. And it only costs about $1,000 for an iPhone. You know what I mean? That's dirt cheap. So there's a lot of good things happening for you guys, except if you went to school and you're taught by those incompetent school teachers, like my poor dad. Now, they're good people, but they haven't got any, as they say in Spanish, no cojones. It's always been socialism, but they don't tell you that. The Federal Reserve Bank is a socialist or a communist organization, but they'll never tell you that. The more I studied it, when I was about 25 years old, I started studying this stuff. And the more I studied, the more I felt I needed a shower. They were just lying to us. I think of my friends in Aussie, and their superannuations, they're empty. And you look at Mitch McConnell from Kentucky here, I think that's where he's from. But when the market crashed in 2020, March of 2020, only 16% of the teachers, firefighters, and police officers' pension was funded, 16%. So they had $16 for every 100 they owed. Now it's down to 6. They're broke. So they're covering all of this up, so they want to bring UBI in so they can just mass produce money, and then so they're going to pay people not to work so they can escape. Do you know what I mean? So, well, we gave you all this money, and they're going to escape. Just remember, when this guy Jerome Powell, I call him the Wizard of Oz, but he's the Federal Reserve Chairman. They're a bunch of criminals, and they know it, but they won't tell you that. Jerome Powell only makes $208,000 a year. I can make that a week, and he's dealing with guys like me, who can outsmart them, outrun them, outgun them. He's dealing with entrepreneurs. So that's why, I say to your generation, with that iPhone, become an entrepreneur. So you don't need the job security. Nothing wrong with it, but you don't want to need it, and you don't need the UBI. You don't need the paycheck. If you can get off of needing that paycheck, you're free. If you can make your own money. That's the difference. This is a little bit more than people need to know, but there's a thing called the debt to GDP ratio. So when the thing crashed in 2020 in March, the debt went up and the GDP, the gross domestic product, went down. So that's what I was saying. So we produce less, but we raised the debt up. So debt went up, GDP went down. And if this coronavirus comes back, which I think it will, we're bankrupt, because the debt to GDP, once debt to GDP passes 90%, we're bankrupt. Today it's 115% debt to GDP in America. So we're already bankrupt. And so the UBI is no different than the Romans paying the Roman citizens to sit in the Colosseum and watch the Dallas Cowboys play the Green Bay Packers. Nothing really changes. People are that stupid, but they don't know. They really don't know. rates. What they're afraid of is deflation, because deflation means depression. So this thing called quantitative easing, which is printing money, that came out in 1930. Well, Bernanke thinks he did it, but he copied it in 1930. And then they have zero interest rates policy. So what that means is they print money, and then they pay you nothing, no interest, zero interest rate policy. And people still say to their kids, go to school, work hard, save money, and, save till it hurts. It's really stupid. And that's because people cannot think, because they went to school to get that job. And if you think like an entrepreneur, you've really got to think outside the box. And I said again, the iPhone gives you so much power. I talked to that young guy. He's got he's 19 years old. His father wants me to tell him to go back to college. And so I called him up. I think the numbers were he gets $12 a month on a subscription basis. And he's got, I think, 6,000 subscribers. So he's making like $72,000 a month. And he says, my father thinks I should go back to college. I said, well, I hate to tell you, I called his father and said, I hate to say this, but I think it's the end of the American empire. And, I was watching CNBC this morning that's another communist organization, but they had this guy named Jim Grant get on there, and he was explaining exactly what I'm saying to you guys. You can't just keep printing this money. And so CNBC asked him, so what should you do? He says, buy gold and buy silver. He says, they're going to destroy the dollar. And the guy, Joe Kernan of CNBC, says, that's such an old idea. I'm going, gold and silver have been here since God created this earth. And Bitcoin is the next replacement to that. So for your generation, it really is to get outside of what mainstream media says is the right way to think, and think for yourselves.